all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We also want to thank Eisenhower Center. It's a brain injury recovery center. Learn more about eisenhowercenter.com. They're located in Michigan and in Florida. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. Contact us if you'd like to be a sponsor on Veterans Radio, and let's move on to our program. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio Matthew Griffin, a Army Ranger who's got an interesting business story over the last 10 years or so. Matthew, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Well, thanks for having me today, Jim. It's good to be here.
Well, you're the Combat Flip-Flop CEO. You sign your stuff Griff. So I hope you don't mind if I call you Griff sometimes.
Yeah, if you call me Matt, I think you're the IRS or
right. And if I call you Matthew, if I call you Matthew, you think your mother's after you. So I know how this works. So you're an Iowa native. How did a nice kid from Iowa end up at West Point and end up an Army Ranger?
I'm a fourth generation warfighter. My great grandfather fought in World War I. Both my grandfathers fought in World War II. My father was actually an academy graduate, so he graduated in 1973, so right after the Vietnam War. He spent 20 years as an Army officer, and then he retired and became a chiropractor. That's how I ended up in Iowa for Palmer School of Chiropractic. And it was just one of those things where either I had to get a scholarship, I had to join the Army, or I had to get a job. And so I just did all three at once, and I just applied to the service academies. I really wanted to go to the Coast Guard Academy. I applied to West Point. I did not apply to Navy just because, beat Navy. But my father and my family probably would have disowned me at that point. But I ended up applying to West Point, and I got accepted to be in the class of 2001. So in June of 1997, I went to West Point, went to the academy. And it was just a great experience. Going through the whole selection process and the down select process and all the interviews, they really do a great job of trying to bring good human beings into the Leadership Academy for the military.
And talk about making your way to the Army Rangers.
Yeah, when you're at the academy, you get exposed to a lot of people who served in the military. And I had a really great mentor who was my TAC NCO when I was a junior and a senior, so Cal and a firstie, who was a mortarman in the Ranger Regiment. And we just got along really well. And I just got to sit down and chat with him. And and every experience I had with guys that served in the Ranger Regiment, I just felt that I vibed with. If that's the best way to say it, is like I really felt that these people were my speed and kind of mindset. So I ended up going artillery of all courses of action, just because I liked the stories of forward observers and the guys working with the infantry, really helping out as the king of battle, not the queen of battle, with the infantry. And so I always I liked it, and I thought it was cool. So jumping out of airplanes, getting to shoot rifles, and then be able to control large munitions seemed like something that I wanted to do. So I was already airborne qualified, officer basic course, and then you go to your pre-ranger training, which they had at officer basic. And so we had 72 guys that started. I think that by the time it all ended up, 12 of us went to ranger school, 6 of us graduated. And then out of those 6 that graduated, 4 of us ended up in the Ranger Regiment, which is a pretty cool experience to have those guys that you spent so much time with be able to lockstep all the way with your career, all the way into combat.
Well, so folks might have looked at you though, Griff, and said, "Oh man, the old man was a lifer. He's at the at the academy now. Griff's in this thing for the long haul. He's going to be a lifer. He's a career man." Didn't turn out that way. You knew you'd end up deployed overseas, and you were. So talk to us a little bit about the deployment to Afghanistan and maybe what was going on mentally for the transition back out of the military to the civilian world.
Well, oddly enough, we didn't know we were going to deploy. You have to remember, we graduated in June of 2001. It was a relatively peaceful time. And so September 11th happened while I was at officer basic course in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And just like everybody else, I felt a feeling of anger and frustration and wanted to get retribution. My girlfriend at the time worked about 4 blocks north of the World Trade Center, so I was scared for her. My mom was a dental hygienist working at a dental clinic for the Navy right outside of the Pentagon, so I was scared for her. And it just was what it was. I was in the Army. I was committed for 5 years. And if I was going to go with the hardest hitting guys that are out there for the Army, which is the Ranger Regiment. So 2003, I went for my first deployment, which was Operation Winter Strike. And that was a paradigm shifting deployment for me, I would have to say. Because I consider myself a fairly astute person when it comes to fighting a war, in which I read the religious books. I read the essential Quran. I read the histories of Afghanistan. I read about all the wars, and I watched all the news, and I read all the reports. And when I got there, what I found was that it was very much different in real life than from the pages of a book or from a TV screen. We deployed to eastern Afghanistan up along the Pakistani border, where a lot of the insurgent fighters were crossing the borders. And then we went to these remote villages in the middle of nowhere. And what we saw was this communities of people who were generally good people who were oppressed by a narco-financed insurgency. They were having to farm opium for the Taliban or for whatever insurgent group was to raise money to fund their networks and their organizations. And these are people who would rather just farm food and put their kids in school than to be fighting in the middle of this war. So it was a very difficult deployment in which we lived for months in villages. In the middle of winter, feet of snow, we were killing sheep for dinner. We were buying all of the food they had in their winter stores, and we were going village to village, valley to valley, tracking down fighters in the middle of winter, which was a tremendous experience. It was exceptionally hard, but I'm thankful for it because it gave me a perspective that most U.S. service members never would have had the opportunity to even see.
And as you say, it was really sort of transformative in your view of military affairs and world affairs, if you will. You get to about 2008, 2009. What are you thinking about what you're going to do next?
So I did 3 deployments to Afghanistan, and I saw kind of the futility in the fight that we were having there. And then the Ranger Regiment, we went to Iraq. So I went to Iraq in 2005, and I saw the same thing that I saw in Afghanistan, but amplified in Iraq, in which, we weren't dealing with fighters from just Pakistan. We were dealing with fighters from Syria, from Iran, from all these different areas who were traveling all over the world to fight us, where they could fight us, where they could just hop in a car and come do it.
Right.
And the reality of, as long as women are giving birth to young boys over there, and we're over there in a uniform capacity, this conflict is going to be ongoing. It's going to be endless. And as much weight as I swung during that time, because the Ranger Regiment, we did have just about every asset under the sun to win this war. And we were, our term in the special operations is mowing the grass, right? We're just going to cut the insurgents down that are there. And then 6-7 months later, they're just going to grow right back.
Sure. Yep.
And, I saw this as a 27-year-old lieutenant or a captain at that point in the Rangers. And there was the general sentiment around that. And we all started seeing this. This is our 4th, 5th year in the war. And that mindset was ongoing. And so I decided that it was time for me to get out. I transitioned to civilian life, which is tough. It just is. And you hear that sentiment by a lot of veterans, and it's the truth. It's just hard on everybody. And I just went to work in the civilian market, just trying to get back to life. I lost my job in the housing crash as a home builder in 2008. I ended up getting hired to work for a company called Remote Medical International, in which we were contracting doctors and clinics and pharmacies to contractors working overseas. So I started traveling back overseas, and I saw that small businesses were making the most positive impact in these war-torn communities. And I saw this in Africa. I saw it through Southeast Asia. I saw it everywhere that I went. And my mindset was, well, how do we bring more small business to these communities to bolster that initiative? It seems more sustainable and ethical than continuing to send surges of young men and women over there to cut more grass. And one day I just walked into a combat boot factory at the invite of a friend who had built the factory. And I saw what I wanted to do with the rest of my life was to, help people make products. So something that they could sell to earn a living, so that way their kids could go to school and eventually it would do well. And the long story is, in this combat boot factory, I saw a flip-flop thong punched through a combat boot sole. It was kind of a prototype joke product that was built. And I just thought it was, a combat flip-flop. So the juxtaposition of the two words was really interesting. I used to think that being an Army Ranger and yanking terrorists, out of their homes in the middle of the night was the best way to serve my country. But now I believe that creating jobs and economy and education in these areas is the best way to serve my country.
And this was sort of accidental while you were realizing the value of small businesses and the security that brought to some of these war-torn villages and locations. Almost accidentally, the business idea of combat flip-flops.
The only way that I could describe it, and it really depends on what your beliefs are, was by divine force. Like the universe kept showing me the same thing in every place that I went, was that small business owners and people that were making things were generally cooler people than people that were shooting each other. So what do we do to create more of that? And yeah, it just happened. And I ended up calling a Ranger buddy of mine, Donald Lee. And I said, hey, man, would you be willing to get on this weird project to make flip-flops in a combat boot factory in Afghanistan? And he said yes. And then my brother came along as our designer. His name's Andy. And then we just started this crazy idea of starting a flip-flop company in a combat boot factory in Afghanistan. And it's since blown up to a multi-million-dollar business working all over the world. And then we use our profits we had used our profits to put little girls to school in Afghanistan. And as of June of 2021, when I did the Q2 numbers, we'd gotten our first comma. We put over 1,000 girls in school for a year in Afghanistan.
I want to come back to that piece because the charity is such a big part of this. In Afghanistan, the impact it was going to have was going to be such a big thing. But what in the world made you and another Ranger buddy think you somehow can cobble together a business and make a buck and make this work? I mean, what pixie dust did you have that some other guy didn't, or were you just too stubborn to know you couldn't do it?
I think we were the only guys dumb enough to try it, to be honest.
I didn't want to use that word. I said stubborn.
Yeah, it's when you come up with a crazy idea, people say, oh, there's no way that'll work. And then there's no way that'll work. There's no way that'll work. It's a good idea, but there's no way it'll work. Well, we used to jump out of airplanes and put 500 guys on an airfield in the middle of the night in under 5 minutes and do some very complicated stuff. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that we can't do it. And that's just our mindset, is like, if real products solve real problems, And if you want to charge a premium for your product, you solve a complicated problem and then charge a premium for it. And so this was a real problem that needed to get solved. And so we came out with a high-end line of footwear that we charge a premium for, but it's a quality product. And we started making something that not only looks good and lasts a long time, but it's got a really cool story and message behind it, which our customers are proud to promote, which is something that what's actually made us believe in it was that we started making this stuff and then people started buying it. And it was mainly service members and people that worked downrange who believed in what we were doing, saw the path that we were on and wanted to support us. And they've been with us ever since 2012.
And that's one of the points I want to get across. It's now 10 years old. It's a real business. It's been there. It's weathered a couple of recessions, financial issues, logistic issues, COVID, all of that, all hard on businesses, and it's there surviving. It's got a great website, combatflipflops.com. And you're into a lot more than just flip-flops. After people stop laughing about the name, you've got some great other products. Talk to us about how that's expanded and moved over time.
So we wrote a book about it, and if anybody wants to hear our story that's loaded full of expletives and high adventure, you can find it on our website. It's called Steps Ascending, Rise of the Unarmed Forces. But the long story is it's not financially feasible or globally competitive to make footwear in Afghanistan. So we had to shift our footwear to Bogota, Colombia. So, war on terror, war on drugs, mountain people suffering from a narco-finance insurgency. It's the same thing. So we shifted our footwear production to Bogota. We started making textiles in Afghanistan. We started making jewelry out of landmines from Laos, left over from the Vietnam War. And we make T-shirts and hats and a bunch of other things here in America. And we're always hunting for cool products made in dicey areas that can have a positive impact in the world.
Part of this story, though, and maybe the part that actually grabs folks and says, yeah, it's great to realize that small business helps communities become stable, but you also recognize that in Afghanistan, the lack of education, primarily for girls, but really for everybody, but the girls here, needed to be changed, and you started to put some resources into us. Talk to us why that's important and where your mindset was 10 years ago or for the last 10 years as you've been on this mission.
Well, it comes back to wanting to win the war, right? And people look at us and they go, you just want to peace, love, and hippies. It'll never work. I was like, no, we're fighters. We are to our core, we are warriors. And sometimes that means you need to take a little bit of a step back and look at why you're in this fight in the first place. And the reason we're in this fight in the first place is because women are not educated. Terrorists come from the same place that we all come from. They come from moms. So unfortunately, in these cultures in which we're doing a lot of our fighting, women are oppressed. They don't have employable skills, no jobs, no education. They're typically married off to men that are 10 to 20 years their seniors. So when the men die, here you have a woman in her 20s or 30s with a couple kids and no way to support them. So if you've ever been to a developing nation, you'll understand there's a lot of kids that are out on the street that are begging for food and for work because they need to support their mom and their family. And if you're a kid and you love your mom and you love your family, you're going to do whatever it takes. And it's in these environments very much, we get equated to gangs here in America. When kids are out on the street because working because mom can't support their family, that's where gangs pick them up and they'll take the easy, fast money to support their family because that's the only thing that's offered to them. So our mindset is if we educate women, the educated women will educate their kids, and educated kids are more resistant to radicalism. A kid would rather go to school than to strap a bomb to themselves in a market. And so our theory and our effort for the past 10 years has been to educate girls in Afghanistan to prove that over time, you can choke out the radical recruitment base simply by educating women.
And you have to somehow break that cycle. And it's so important. This charitable effort by Combat Flip-Flops was so important to break that cycle. But as a warfighter, as a businessman, as somebody who's being philanthropic in Afghanistan, the U.S. pullout earlier this year really had to pull your heart apart. Talk to us a little bit about your reaction and what ultimately you've had to do relative to the philanthropic efforts educating women and children in Afghanistan.
I'll have to say that is the first time my daughters have ever seen me cry. It was heartbreaking. These people are our friends. They're our family. We've been working with them for 10 years. And to hear that they're having to collect their families and run for their lives so quickly, like it just fell apart, absent of what anybody heard. And to have, people struggling to get to an airport and losing people that you're chatting with in that bomb explosion, everybody felt helpless. I'd have to say that was the only time in my life that I've truly felt helpless. What could we do? And, we did our best to leverage all our resources to keep people safe, to get them in safe houses. We send money forward for food and clothing and medical supplies. We've had families get cholera. So we had to send money via MoneyGram to pay for doctors, to get medicines. We've been trying to work with any organization that will help get documentation, paperwork, passports. And it's just been soul crushing, to have everything fall apart and to have people who were on the rise now be pushed further back into a hole than they've ever seen in their entire adult lives. And that was at the result of a lot of laziness and poor decision-making on behalf of our national and military leadership.
Well, as they say, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And unfortunately, we saw that sort of play itself out on real-time TV and really impact people who, for 20 years, many of them were helping the U.S. military. And in your instance, for 10 years, half that time, you were helping them build a new life. And I think all of us were hoping that, well, for 20 years, at least girls have been getting educated and they're now teenagers or maybe even a little older. That ought to have an impact on the country. I don't think we've seen it yet, but we can be still hopeful. Are you still hopeful, Griff?
No,
I take it.
I'm trying to be really pragmatic about this, and I'm probably have to say like the most hopeful person, and I'll have to say that I've put my entire adult life into this effort and initiative, and I've sacrificed, as well as my entire team has sacrificed, a tremendous amount behind this initiative. But that being said, as we tell people the hard realities of what life is like, and you could go back through all of my podcasts through the end of 2019, 2020, 2021, and I've been calling how this was going to go for over 2 years now, since they started announcing the peace talks, because for some reason, people still listen to those in suits behind pulpits on the TV. They still listen to the media anchors and all the people there who have never actually set foot in country outside of a secured wall. They have never dealt with the culture of the population ever. And they just don't understand how it's going to go. And the sad reality is there's so many international forces around this landlocked nation of Afghanistan, so many tribal considerations, which are, I've been working in and out of that area for 20 years, and I'd still say I've only scratched the surface of understanding of how it is, but it's very easy to see with that rudimentary level of understanding that any decision made from Washington, D.C. regarding the direction of that country is not going to turn out well. There is some hope in the fact that there are some very large commercial initiatives put forward that might stabilize the country. China does not want Afghanistan to descend into chaos. Iran does not want that country to descend into chaos. Pakistan does not want that country to descend into chaos. They're all somewhat invested in the stability of the area, because if they don't stabilize that area, then it's going to be bad for everybody. So I'm going to have to say, give it 10, 15 years. We'll find out.
How does combat flip-flop, which had this education of girls in Afghanistan at its core, how do you move? How do you pivot? What's next that is at the core for combat flip-flops?
For those familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we were on the second or third rung for the past 10 years, but now we're down at food, water, shelter. And that's what's important to us, is we have friends and family who are there. And so we are now pivoting to keep people warm, keep people fed, keep people in homes, and supply them with medical supplies. So we've pivoted our philanthropic effort to that initiative. We've pivoted our factory that was making scarves and textiles to send to the United States to making blankets and making jackets. And so we're still employing people. We're still sending money forward to do that. And people can participate in that effort if they want to. If they feel that they would like to put a jacket on a human being who is suffering, they cost $15. If you want to give them a blanket for a small child who is freezing, it costs $10. If you want to, give a little bit more and then have some cash in the kitty for medical supplies, then, we'll take those donations as well. Like right now, it's just become a full-on press effort to keep people warm, clothed, sheltered, fed, and with proper medical care. So we've done that. If people want to check it out, they can go to combatflipflops.com/AfghanWoobie. So Afghan, AFGHAN, WOOBIE. So combatflipflops.com/AfghanWoobie. Or if you go to our blog, it's the first part on there. But we partnered with a 501c3, 46 and T transitions to help us generate tax-deductible receipts for any donors that feel like they want to help out in the initiative.
That's great. That's where I was hoping we would end up, is how folks can continue to help what you're doing. Check out the footwear, the apparel, the accessories, but also if what really moves you is, hey, I want to be doing something on a philanthropic, charitable front, how do I do that? And again, go to the blog. It's right there as the first item up, how you might donate and help.
And what I think just everybody needs to just realize is that this isn't an American westernized, initiative. This is going to be ongoing. This is going to take 6 months, 8 months, a year to get people stabilized and on their feet and safe. Every penny that we get, none of it is used for overhead. All of it goes toward the initiative. So as soon as the donations come in, the funds get pushed forward, and we're helping out wherever we can. And we hope it's enough, right? We're going to help as many people as we can for as long as we can. And we really appreciate everybody's support in doing that.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Matthew Griffin, for taking some time today to talk about combat flip-flops, for talking about what's going on in Afghanistan and efforts to help those people have food, water, shelter, medical services, people who you've worked with for better than a decade at this point. Griff is a former Army Ranger. We didn't get to talk about it, but he's also the father of 2 alpha females, which is a great phrase. I'm going to start using it with some in my family. And I think, you're doing great work, and I want to direct people to combatflipflops.com. Griff, thanks for taking some time today.
Thank you, Jim. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody.
Same to you and the family.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Eisenhower Center, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. They keep us on the air, as does your support. Go to Facebook, go to veteransradio.net, and support our efforts. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, oh, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.